It is our pleasure to be joined by a man that played 8 years in the National Football League. You can hear him on SiriusXM Pac-12 radio. You can see him all over Fox Sports. He's even a writer, and he is a future Big Ten legend. Geoff Schwartz, what's going on, buddy?
Well, I have 1 year left on Pac-12 radio, so we know the end date, buddy. I don't know. Just like you do Big 12 radio, you're probably gonna have a couple new additions on that side. I hope to find myself one day on Big Ten radio, but yeah, man, it's all changed, and it went from like 100 to 1,000, and then back to like 0 today. It feels like nothing even happened, even though it was just a few days ago. It's crazy, man. A lot of change in college sports very quickly, and a conference that had been around since 1915. This is the first time the Pac-12 incorporated to what their Pac-4. There was a Pacific Conference, and it was added UCLA and USC, then went to Arizona State. It's done. It's going to be gone pretty soon.
What's the change going to be like? Is this one of those things where we're all been out of shape about it and worried about the future and nostalgic about the past, and then once this thing gets underway, we're not going to notice it that much?
It's a good question, right? Let's take Oregon, for example. So part of the reason I think we like college sports is we like the shared traditions, the scar tissue, like knowing the opponent very well, even though you might not know players per se, but like, oh shit, if Oregon's going to Stanford, that's a problem, right? No matter who Stanford is, like we always struggle with Stanford. So you have to build those ties basically in a new conference. You got to figure out who your Stanford's going to be, right? Who the opponent's going to be that's going to come into your house and give you trouble. And you have to build the care, like the want to watch those games against opponents you really don't care about. Now, the big games are going to be great. Remember, Ohio State, Michigan State, and Penn State. Those four are going to play each season. Washington, Oregon, UCLA, USC. Great, right? Much better games. But the game like Oregon, Iowa, I don't know. I got to find a way to care about that game, right? I've cared about Oregon, Arizona a lot more. I have a history with Arizona. I've watched Arizona play for 30 years now. So I think that's figuring out those reasons to watch some of the schools that you don't really care about is going to have to be new. But in the end, I mean, I'm going to watch as much football as possible. The question is, I'll watch Oregon State play Cal right now. Am I going to watch Illinois, Purdue next season? I don't know. We'll find. I mean, I might have to, but like that's the new part of it for like me and for you guys. You're gonna have to start watching this year. I imagine probably start watching some Arizona. Well, I guess Oklahoma. You're watching SEC, but Gabe, you're on Big 12. You're gonna watch some Pac-12. You got a lot to watch, but you're gonna start probably pay attention more to the SEC. So it's just.
But even
new.
for us, like Houston versus UCF or something like that, like something that we wouldn't have even been interested in previously. That's on the list now.
You're going to have to watch that game. And so it's different for us than I think it is for like a fans. I mean, fans are going to watch no matter what, but are they going to watch the other games now, right? The games that they used to just watch because they sort of had a common knowledge of the opponent and it mattered for their conference. Are they going to is an Oregon fan going to watch random Big Ten game versus where they would probably watch a random Pac-12 game? Over time, it probably evens out. But again, we're going to probably have a change in 5 to 6, 7 years when the Big Ten and SEC just become one giant conference, right? I mean, Chip Kelly talked about it yesterday or the day before. Look what Notre Dame's doing, right? They're independent for football and they're ACC for everything else. That feels like where we might go. You're independent for football, and then everything else is within a conference, and maybe that's more regionalized to make it easier on travel. So right now it's going to settle down, but in the next couple of years it could ratchet back up again.
Yeah. It's gonna be interesting to see where this all goes. Now, before we dive into how your Ducks are going to fare in the Big Ten, like, how did we get here, man? Like, who's to blame? Kliavkoff is just getting. I mean, he's getting crushed.
I mean, the blame goes all the way back to 2010 when the Pac-12 couldn't get Texas and Oklahoma to commit. Right? I mean, they were close. They're on the 2-yard line. And then Texas won the Longhorn Network, and the Pac-12 wasn't willing to bend with their request for their own network. If they just would have said, you know what, you could have Longhorn Network, whatever, man. They'd probably be in the Pac-12 right now, right? Which is ironic because the Pac-12 tried to do this first. They tried to get Oklahoma State, Texas, and I think A&M all the Pac-12 plus Colorado and Utah to form a 16-team conference. And they were close. It didn't happen. And then sort of just along the way, little mistakes here and there, right? Not getting the Pac-12 network on DirecTV. ESPN wanted to buy the Pac-12 network, not buy, but help with distribution and kind of take over production. They said no. I mean, there's little things along the way like that where, if they had done little things, they would have probably saved themselves. And I think USC at times wasn't an honest partner in the relationship. We know that George Koloffkoff tried to expand the last couple of years with Big 12 teams, and USC said no, while I think talking to the Big 10. So, they've always sort of wanted out in this. People want to blame the networks. I mean, the report today, Fox paid for Oregon and Washington to go to the Big 10. They just threw more money, sure, I guess that's the network's fault, but it's all this fault. George Koloffkoff, I think the two mistakes he made were, one, getting jumped by the Big 12, right? You got jumped. And two, and so sure along the same lines, you just overvalued your conference. There's reports that he sought $50 million per school. A little heavy. And then it was like 43 million per school. It was 40 per school. And so, but once the Big 12 jumped the Pac-12, I don't think there's been even a deal to present on the linear side. Like ESPN and Fox have been out. And so combination of the media landscape right now, plus all of that, these are all these reasons. John Wilner, who wrote a long article, like 12 reasons why. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why we're here. USC not being good at football for many, many years has not helped. It's not helped at all. It's just sad we're here. But once USC and UCLA left, it felt inevitable this was going to happen.
Here's kind of how I view it in a weird sense. Because right now we've got the realignment, but you've kind of got the Big Ten. Big Ten is expanding. The SEC is expanding. I feel like what the ultimate goal is, it's like a team in the offseason signing free agents and bringing guys in. We're going to cut down eventually to our 53-man roster. And I feel like the networks are tired of carrying, like you were mentioning, like some of the games, like, are you going to watch Purdue, Indiana, or something like that? I think the networks don't want to carry those anymore because it costs them money to put it on, to staff it, all of those things. And ultimately everyone's just waiting on Ohio, Michigan. And I think right now you've expanded, but do you think there's going to be a point where it tightens down? Like you said, in football, maybe the conferences are different in other sports, but ultimately the networks are going to carry more of the big games of the opponents everyone watches.
Well, you're exactly right. I mean, you're going to have a weekend where you're going to have, a Oklahoma playing LSU, and then followed by UCLA playing Michigan, and then followed by Oregon playing Penn State, and followed by Texas playing Alabama. I mean, that's a possibility in a weekend to have those four games over ESPN, Fox, CBS, and NBC.
God, that's sexy, Geoff.
Right? Like I mean, that's possible, right? And next weekend it's Penn State, UCLA, and then it's Michigan against Washington, and then it's Auburn playing Texas, and then it's Oklahoma in the night game taking on Mississippi State. I mean, it's better than Oklahoma playing Houston, right? Or whatever they would say in the Big 12. Like, you're going to get, to your point, you're going to get better games. But again, if you view the sport as regional, which my parents are Bruin alums, I grew up in Los Angeles, I played at Oregon, I do Pac-12 radio, it stinks, right? Because the regionality of this is gone. But if you view it from a national lens, which I think the point you made is good, is that you get better national games. You have better games each weekend. And the networks are going to be very happy. And they'll put the secondary content on Big Ten Network, SEC Network, ESPN Plus, like NBC or Paramount, Peacock. I don't know which one they have. They'll have secondary, places to put these games. The Big Ten Network is going to have games from 12 p.m. Eastern, right? The first kickoff, all the way to 2 a.m. Eastern. They're going to have a Big Ten After Dark with 4 schools in the Pacific time zone now. Like, they're going to have content all day. Like, they just better, it's better action, better content, more fan bases to watch. The question is, in the next round of realignment, do schools get thrown out of the big conferences?
Look at like Florida State is saying right now what a lot of people have been thinking. right? About
Yeah.
the people that bring in the money, bring in the eyeballs. Why are we sharing with the people that don't?
Yeah. I mean, it's a good question. Again, like Oregon gets a lot of ratings. Like if you watch, Oregon gets good ratings. Why is Oregon sharing the same money as some of the Big Ten schools that just happen to be in the Midwest? I mean, it's a valid question, right? For Florida State, you're like, why are we sharing money with a Duke, a Wake Forest, that aren't getting the ratings? But I just don't know if this sport should all be about who gets watched and who doesn't. I mean, I get that's what sort of it is at times, but I think we're certainly going in that direction.
Yeah, my hope is that it all the schools can stay viable enough, right? I know it's about money, but like Oregon State. I mean, I feel so bad for that fan base. It's not
Yeah.
like they've got awful fans. It's just it's not a huge school. You look at like Washington State. That's where I feel for
Yeah.
those people, and I don't know what's going to happen to them, Geoff.
So I think what sucks is that a lot of decisions are being made about, basically where you live, right? Like what city you're in. Corvallis, I looked up right now, has nearly 60,000 people that live there. I would imagine that there are some Big 10, Big 12 schools that have the same, right? I mean, some of these college campuses, I mean, some of these cities are small. And it's not fair that basically Oregon State gets left out because they're just in a smaller city and they're not part, like Manhattan, Kansas, right? Where Kansas State is at, has the same population, 55,000. But they just
Stillwater, Lubbock,
but they just so happen to like be in the Big 12, which won, and they did win. They won this conference realignment, I think. And so Oregon State gets left out because they're just in the wrong city, which is the way I felt about Oregon too. I'm like, why? Oregon's in Eugene. Like, so what? People watch us play football. Well, if you look at the ratings again, Oregon games rate very highly. Why are we being left out because we're in a smaller city? It's some of this doesn't make sense to me. I mean, it does, I guess. Other thing that doesn't make sense, but I think your point, Teddy, is really good about the networks wanting these big time games, is that networks are seemingly okay with paying 8 of the Pac-12 schools so far to be in different conferences, plus potentially Stanford and Cal in different conferences. So 10 of the 12 schools, but not the 12 together as a conference. So they want the better games, right? They want those better matchups. They're paying for 1 or 2 of those a year versus the matchup of an Oregon Cal. Well, that game's gone now. Now it's Oregon, Michigan State. And so I think that's what they're paying for, but it seems odd, right? They're willing to pay what sounds like 10 of 12 Pac-12 schools, a competitive deal to be on linear television, but weren't capable of paying them to stay together to make that happen.
Isn't it a little bit odd or ironic that this is probably going to be the best year the Pac-12 has had in 2 decades?
2 decades, I think ever. Like there's 4 teams right now that enter, 4 teams with legitimate opportunity to make a playoff. I actually don't think any of them do because the schedule kind of sucks for all 4 of those teams. But Utah, now Cam Rising's knee, we'll find out if he plays week 1. I'm skeptical he does. Oregon, obviously, Washington, USC. The schedules for, USC has that at Notre Dame game. Utah has Florida, Baylor. The non-conference matters a lot if you can stay undefeated, right? But those 4 teams all play each other in a 5-week stretch. They all round robin. Starts with Oregon, Washington, October 14th. I think ends November 11th with USC at Oregon and Washington playing Utah. Like they all play each other. So it's not gonna be a playoff team. But again, we've never had a situation where 4 teams feel that way. And then Oregon State, you mentioned the Beavers, their schedule sets up to be like 9-1 or 8-2 to finish the season with Washington and Oregon. And then so there's like, they can end up with, spoiling both those schools' chances at a playoff. And we have, 5, 6, 7 quarterbacks that are going to the NFL, some guys higher than other guys. But again, we have a couple pass rushers that are first round talents. We got wide receivers that are first round talents. We got a lot of talent and a lot of quarterbacks. And unfortunately, we're talking about where teams are playing next season. And it's just very Pac-12, right? That you end up having a situation where presumably your Pac-12 championship game is going to be between 2 teams who will not be in your conference next season. Which, I mean, I guess the Big 12 in theory could have that too with Oklahoma and Texas, right? Meaning in that game. But it's where we are in the sport. And the Pac-12, they got outmaneuvered and they weren't ready to make it happen. The Big 12, look, stability is important to presidents, right, man? They want, especially out west, they are conservative presidents, man. They want stability. They want known. They want to be able to tell their alumni, like, we're set, we're here, we're ready to go. The instability, the maybe Apple's 23 million, maybe it's 31, maybe it's 40. Presidents aren't going for that.
Yeah. No, I think the uncertainty of what that Apple deal looked like it clearly did not sit well with the leadership at Oregon and Washington.
No.
Now, as you can imagine, Geoff, there are quite a few people that listen to this podcast that have been paying close attention to USC.
Yeah.
You're covering them all the time now for Pac-12 radio. What have you thought of USC under Lincoln Riley so far?
I mean, I think what I expected, really good on offense and can't tackle a soul on defense. The thing that has been quite actually surprising to me is how poorly USC's been recruiting, just in general for the standards of USC, right? So, USC fans will push back. Oh, we had a higher blah, blah, blah last year. Lincoln Riley just brought over 3 guys from Oklahoma that he had already, right? The 3 top guys, basically. But he can't recruit offensive defensive linemen. You need those guys to win. You need 4- and 5-star offensive linemen to win a championship. You can't win a championship building a defense through a portal. You just can't. And USC fans are, we got Bear Alexander. If you're leaving Georgia, it's probably a reason why you're leaving Georgia, right? Like, I don't know. I would stay if I was a good defender at Georgia. So they have a 1 deep. That's it. A 1 deep on defense. And Alex Grinch, I just don't get it, man. Like, he still continues to call it defense like he's at Washington State. It makes no sense to me. But Caleb Williams is incredible. They're going to win 10 games again, but they're not good enough on defense, I think, to have any chance to win a national championship anytime soon. You have to, if you look at the best teams across the country, they are building up front, right? With 4- and 5-star offensive defensive linemen. You have to have those guys. When you go portaling, by the way, which is fine. You add a couple pieces here. Oregon added a 5-star DN. Great. 1 defensive end, right? Because if you bring a bunch of transfers in and you focus on those guys getting reps, you don't even build your young depth behind those guys, right? Because you're so focused on getting those guys integrated. And so you have to build with the high school recruiting and then also supplement with portal. You can't have your starting defense, your impact defenders all be in the portal. What happens one year when the portal's a little dry, right? Or the NCAA cracks down on the transfer limits, or NIL money dries up a little bit. Then what? Then you're stuck with a bunch of guys that aren't ready to play football. You haven't trained up and aren't good enough. The blue chip ratio, it matters. It's been proven to matter. You have to have a certain number of players to be good. I'm pulling up right now. I think I tweeted the other day. USC fans were not happy with me, but Oregon's gone like 20 since Dan Lanning's been there, including 2022, like over 20 4- and 5-star offensive defensive linemen. USC's gotten like 7. Like it matters, man. You need those big bodies to win football games. And so Riley is an incredible offensive coach. Like he's an amazing offensive coach. So I have it right here. Oregon's got, in the last since 2022, in the first year of Riley and Lanning, including the class so far this year, Oregon has 17 4- and 5-star offensive linemen, and USC has 5. Offensive defensive linemen, both lines, 17-5. Like you can't supplement with the portal each year. You have to bring those guys in recruiting. Look, again, Riley's an incredible offensive coach. He's a soft spot for Alex Grinch. I don't get it. And I don't know if their defense will be much better this year. They have better. I mean, Mason Cobb is good, but guess what? They brought in 2 All-American linebackers, freshman All-American linebackers last year, right? Shane Lee and Gentry. And how'd that work for them? They had the leading sack getter in all college football last season in Tui Tuipulotu, 2nd-round draft pick. They had a safety draft in the 3rd round. We act like USC had no talent last season on defense. So I don't know, man. I don't buy the defensive resurrection. They play Washington, Oregon this season and go to Notre Dame, who will be much better this year. So they're going to win 10, 11 games because of their offense, but they're not going to be able to compete for a championship unless they fix their defense.
Yeah. I think that they most likely will have a better team than they had last year with a worse record because of how much more difficult their schedule is. You think Lincoln Riley, it's almost like he has a marketing problem, like a perception problem. I know that they focus a ton of resources and attention on recruiting those players, but the overwhelming national narrative is Lincoln Riley's a great coach on offense. He's going to bring in some transfer guys, but his teams don't play defense. And he recognizes that. It's not like he's dumb and doesn't want to get better on defense, but I don't know that in recruiting he's ever going to be able to overcome that prevailing thought out there that they don't worry about defense. Recruits hear that stuff nationally.
Yeah, they do. I'm trying to pull up right now. I think that a lot of the issues with defense are about practice habits and what you focus on at practice, right? You can't just say, I want to tackle better. You got to practice tackling. Like you actually have to. I was watching an Oregon video yesterday or today. It's a hype video. I get it. The team puts it out, but they're actually tackling in practice. They sucked on defense last year. They couldn't tackle. Guess what they're doing? They're taking each other to the ground. Someone might get hurt. It happens, right? But they're physically practicing taking people to the ground. And that matters to me. It still matters to hit people in practice. And I've not watched a USC practice video, but guys, I don't think they're live tackling in practice, right? In the spring.
I can tell you this, Geoff. We went to quite a few towards the end of the tenure there, obviously, and there were 9-on-7 wasn't much of a thing.
Yeah,
they went away from some. You're just talking about staples of football practice.
And that to me, that those things matter to your team and whether or not you're going to hit people on Saturdays. Again, they're going to out offense a lot of teams. Like Caleb Williams is, I hate comparing anyone to Patrick Mahomes, but he's that good. Like he is an incredible football player. And he's a great dude. We've interviewed Pac-12 Media Day, like the humblest guy. Like he's just an awesome person. I think people are going to really love when, kind of maybe nationally when we get to the NFL and people maybe get to know him a little bit better as a person. Everything about him is great. I love Caleb, but like they got to hit people in practice. I get it. In this spring, Lincoln Riley canceled a spring practice because they didn't have enough healthy players, but not because they didn't have enough healthy offensive defensive linemen. They didn't have healthy wide receivers and like running backs. Now they made the practice up. I think they did make it up later, but like, anyone else canceling a practice because of injuries in spring ball? You can't just like suck it up and get after it. I mean, right? Like, I remember one time in the NFL, we had a bunch of offensive linemen down with Kansas City, and I had played an entire preseason game, every rep of the preseason game, and I had to do every rep in practice the next day. Andy Reid was like, "Sorry, buddy, we're not changing anything for you. Like, we're just practicing. It's like what it is. Let's just suck it up sometimes in practice. Like guys are beat up, they're hurt. Like you just have to get it in, builds character. You can't stop and not practice because a couple guys are banged up. You have 100 guys on a roster. Get a practice in. And like that mindset to me is not a championship mindset. Do Georgia and Alabama ever stop practicing because of injuries? Does Clemson ever stop practicing because of injuries? No. And again, they made the practice up, but that's not the point of what I'm saying, right? The point is like, you got 100 guys. You have people to practice, just make it happen.
Yeah. There's always the, like, how do we respond to bad situations? And those are things that you have to take those as it's a little bit of an opportunity to teach your football team something in a spot like that. Nationally, who are you looking for? Who's going to be the best teams we see this year?
Well, I think Georgia, obviously, it just comes down to this apathy. Like, do they care as much? And their schedule is a joke. And they do. I think one actually football thing is interesting is that they have had now 2 years of NFL defensive, like defenders, right? Like you basically bring in a brand new too deep on defense. Like, how good are those guys going to be? How quickly can they play well? That's a real thing, I think, that matters. But the schedule, it doesn't really matter very much. I actually think Clemson's going to be back this year. They finally decided we have to make changes on offense. They went and got Garrett Riley, obviously. Klubnik's going to be good, I think, in that system. And defensively, they're going to be really good again. I think Clemson's like a kind of a not won't sneak up on anyone, but a team that people, I think, like, Dabo's lost it a little bit. I think they're going to be back. Everyone's picking LSU. It's possible, but Jaden Daniels, he's got to just get to that next level, right? If he gets to that next level, then I think they're capable of playing for a national championship. But they have to go through, Georgia, obviously, and probably an SEC championship game, and beat Alabama. Like, you got a lot of things to do. Those are probably, Michigan's got to show me, like, they got to beat a playoff team to make it happen. The thing about college football, isn't it weird? Like, you're like, yeah, there's like 3 teams that can win it. That's about it. That's probably about it. But we still love the sport nonetheless. It's my biggest pet peeve about how people cover college sports is that, fans have been convinced that all that matters is a playoff berth. Winning 10 games is hard to do. Like, it's hard to do. Go 10-2 is a great season for 99% of college football programs. And yet somehow we view that as a negative, which I think is really silly.
Yeah. You look at last year, Ohio State is a couple plays away from going and playing for a national championship, and Ohio State fans are like, should we start thinking about firing Ryan Day? It's just, it's a crazy sport, and that's why we love it. I, for one, am shocked that you're not buying the Texas hype. Jeff, I know how much you love the Longhorns.
Why? What have they done to give me? I'm not a person that does the hype thing. Like, you got to show me first. I mean, they're not going to lose that random road game they lose every year. Now, Sark is doing, as I mentioned, what Riley was not doing. Sark is doing that. He's getting high level offensive defensive alignment. Their left tackle is incredible. He was coming to Oregon before Mario left. Calvin Banks, true freshman player every snap last year. Like, they're building in the offensive defensive lines. They're doing the right things, but they're not to be trusted until proven otherwise. And so I don't trust them quite yet to be that team. If everything works out and they play better on defense and a quarterback emerges, whether that's Quinn Ewers plays like the Alabama game or like or Arch Manning's ready to go. They're a very talented team, but they're just not to be trusted. I think they've won 10 games one time since 2005. Like, it's like, you got to prove it to me, man.
Yeah. What about Clemson? Clemson, Florida State, anything there with either of those two?
Well, I'm in on Clemson. Florida State's interesting. I think we'll see with the LSU game, right? If they beat LSU, I think I'm in on them being able to compete for a championship. Jordan Travis is a good wager for Heisman, in my opinion. He has sort of the play style that has worked in the past to win Heisman awards. And he's going to, especially if they beat LSU, his name is going right there immediately, right away. So Florida State, I think, has but again, are you beating a Georgia team? Like, how do you have it up front to beat Georgia? Because again, we've seen many good offensive lines and running backs and quarterbacks play that Georgia team and just get smoked. And that's why LSU excites me, because LSU offensively played pretty well against Georgia in the SEC championship game last year. Defensively, they were a wreck. But if Florida State should be a 10-win team probably this year, them in Clemson. And I just know they're good enough to win a championship, though.
Yeah. Jeff, you're the man. We always appreciate catching up with you. Congrats on your Ducks.
Oh, I guess.
Being in one of the super conferences.
I guess. Whatever. At least I feel like we're saved, but like, I don't know. I didn't mind the Pac-12.
It'll all be okay, man.
Yeah,
we'll
be
get
fine.
Used to it.
I'll get used to it. You're right.
All right, buddy. See ya.